just to cover costs really. In the meantime, we've got the very distinguished Mr. Clin Ashton-Martin, ably assisted by Barbara, who does all the work. What do you call her? What do I call her? Yeah,
she's a rib stitching specialist.
Rib stitching specialist, that's right. All right. So without further ado, Clin Ashton-Martin's going to talk to us about something, aviation or something.
Thank you. Give Barbara the bell.
She's the timekeeper. I have a reputation for running over time. But my idea is to run through the rather, I think, unique flying education that I received years and years ago, because it's a little bit different in spots. To give you, first of all, I'll give you a very brief rundown of what my flying education career was like. In 1952, I found myself up at Oxford. I was a graduate student in engineering, and I had also discovered that you could learn to fly through the Oxford University Air Squadron, which was run by the RAF. And so I immediately got myself tested and got in, and off I went, and we flew, had a regular appointment once a week at an airstrip called an airfield, all over the field by the way, at Kidlington, which was about a 20-minute bus ride from Oxford. We were taught on the Chipmunk to start with, and then we went on to the Harvard, still there after we'd done about 120 hours flying, and then I was fortunate enough to get onto a wings course and then a jet conversion, and the group of us from university squadrons all over England there were 17 of us on the course, and we were actually the last students to get our wings without doing a jet conversion, because after that you had to complete your jet conversion before they give you the wings. So that's what I did, and then I came home and I flew for a very short period with the City of Sydney Squadron back on Wirrawais, which the Wirrawai doesn't compare with the Harvard I might add. And then I was starting to earn my living, and I got too busy and too tired dashing out to Richmond every weekend and doing very little flying because the financial restrictions were on the RAAF at that time. So I then resigned, and I've been paying for my own flying ever since, which is not half as pleasant, I can say. Now, I had a lovely instructor, Flight Lieutenant Bill Higgins of all things, would you believe? It's a lovely name. And he had been a bomber pilot during the war. Virtually all our instructors had all been through the war, and they thought that they were terribly safety conscious. Well, it doesn't compare to today. But anyway, I went off. My first experience with Bill was I went out week after week after week, and of course it was snowing and it was fog, and you just couldn't fly. And eventually I went out there, and he said, "Oh, come on, we'll go." I suppose the cloud base was about 500 feet. So we took off, and we went flying around, and he made the mistake of asking me if I knew where the airfield was. Of course, I said, over the fainter side. Anyway, the ground was all completely covered with snow, and the airfield hadn't been used except for us. So it was a bit of a drastic introduction to finding your way around in the winter in the UK. So we progressed, and one of the things that I think was important is that we were always taught to do glide approaches, you shut the throttle at about the base point, and from there on in it was bad form to have to use any more power. You just use judgment as to where you put the flaps on to get you to land at the appropriate point. And I got up to the point of going solo, and this of course is the aeroplane. For those that don't know what a chipmunk looks like, that's it. Lovely training aeroplane, and very much appreciated by my instructors who've been teaching people to fly in tiger moths in the winter in an open cockpit. I don't know how they survived, but anyway, it was rather good. So I went solo, and the next week I came out to fly. I was sent off on my first solo flight, and it was a lovely day, and I climbed up to about 2,500 feet over the airfield. For some reason I just spiraled up over the airfield, and the engine cut. This is not the sort of thing to happen on one's first solo flight. With great presence of mind I slammed the throttle shut, and I was cool as a cucumber. I made my plan of what I was going to do, and it's very interesting talking to people about forced landings, how they wonder how they're going to react. And this is common practice that when you have a forced landing, you react very positively, cool, calm and collected. What happened to me, I was cool, calm and collected, and we had a so-called tower. It was not very high, it was about this height, and a fellow on the radio there. So I called him up and told him that I had an engine failure where it was. And so he said, just select any runway and come into land. And that was very nice of him. By the time I was coming down to circuit height, and by the time I was gliding downwind, I began to shake. And then I suppose I went halfway downwind, and I realised that I was a little concerned, and I just said to myself, well, I've got to get a hold on myself here, and which I did. And then by the time I got to base turn, I was right as rain. And then my previous training it just kicked in, and that's where this idea of always doing glide approaches paid off handsomely, because it was just to me a normal landing. I didn't have to use any particular judgment at all. So I landed the aeroplane satisfactorily, and it was not an uncommon matter really to have forced landings in the squadron. If I remember correctly, we had about 10 chipmunks, something of that nature. We had a few problems that occurred. One fellow flew through a power line and lived to tell the tale. Anyway, he flew back to base with the wire embedded straight in the leading edge of one wing. It had been chopped by the propeller and broken off at the tip. And he was asked, did he see a big blue flash? And he said, no, it was orange. And the other, there's a big competition always between Oxford and Cambridge, and they were having a flying competition, shortest distance to land over a wall string, and our fellows broke 3 aeroplanes practicing. And poor old Chippy Tailwheel particularly didn't like them, and slammed into the ground. As things were pretty serious. Just out of interest, we did about 130 hours on the chipmunk, and then we got a thing called a preliminary flying badge, which is actually this set of wings at the top here. Maybe it's just like a junior wings, and then. We went on to the Harvard. Harvard was a big step forward. This is me on Harvard at Kidlington, and this is me on a Harvard actually at Oshkosh, I think, many years later, but in the same position. But that's the Harvard cycle. You wind up with a supercharger to deal with, and constant speed propeller, and all sorts of complications, retractable undercarriage. It's a major learning exercise to step from one to the other. One of the most interesting things that happened is that we'd been flying for the Harvard for some time on our grass airfield, and then we went off on what they called a summer camp. I think it was for 3 weeks. We went off and did intensive flying, and this summer camp we went to a base that was all concrete apron and runways, and we all stood around and hee-hawed at our other people that were learning about tail wheels on smooth surfaces, because they gyrated all over the place. Initially, they were just taxiing out, expecting it to be like on the grass, and it's not. The chipmunks don't worry much about whether they're on grass or concrete, but the Harvard just takes a few moments to get used to. One of our friends back here at Kidlington demonstrated the fact that Harvards will flick. One of my pet manoeuvres was to be climbing out in the Harvard and get into the altitude where I was going to do whatever exercise it was, and then just heaving straight back on the control column, and the aeroplane immediately stalls and flicks. It flicks to the left, and it rolls right round and comes out flying level at the right altitude, with the engine going chug 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 as it pulls it along. Anyway, this guy was landing the aeroplane, and of course he landed probably about 25 feet too high, and so of course the aeroplane flipped and dropped its left wing and then cartwheeled and went right over, planted the engine into the middle of the runway, and then it went over and fell on its undercarriage, facing back the way that it had been coming, and the engine was on fire. Needless to say, the fire truck didn't start. I've been at three cases in England at that time where a fire truck was a requirement, and on each occasion the fire truck wouldn't start. It just gives you an idea of the sort of change that has occurred in safety. Our CO who took that poor pilot back up immediately. He went on to be quite successful, but it's easy to make a mistake like that. It's just illustrating the problem of landing too high with an aeroplane that will flick. We used to do some interesting things as students, because to start with, in winter, the whole of England pretty well is covered in low cloud, about 1,000-foot base, and the clouds 1,000 to 2,000 foot thick. You climb up through that, the beautiful blue skies and sunshine, it's lovely. And so I would be sitting there just thinking about nothing in particular, as my instructor climbed us up through the cloud, and we came out the top, and then I would have to take over and do my stuff. And one day I'm just sitting there thinking of nothing, and he says, "You have control." So I had to take control. And of course, I came out the bottom of the cloud and screamed. So he said, now we will start instrument flying. And I was talking to someone the other day about this, that it was not possible to do that to a student in civilly in the CASA regime, and I was told that that's not the case, that if the instructor has an instrument rating, and I presume that the aircraft also, then you can do that to a student. But it certainly it completely impresses on a student the fact that they just cannot survive unless they learn to instrument fly. So that was good fun. But we also did a lot of low flying. Low flying was regarded as being a very essential part of training. Because during World War I and II, I suppose, but particularly II, there were lots of requirements for people to low fly, getting across France and so on, getting away from other fighters. And I remember clearly in a Harvard on our wings course, flying down a river. When I say a river, it's only about twice as wide as this room, with high banks, and I'm below the level of the banks, and the wingtips are just a metre off each side. And the thing's going, we're doing this, and at the same time I'm supposed to be map reading with a map held up here. We finished this exercise, and the ex-wartime instructor sitting in the back said, "You'd never have made it across France." I can well understand the need for it, but many's the time I've read the time on a village clock, looking upwards. There was virtually no restriction on our low flying, so long as we were out of the country. There was a normal restriction if we were low flying solo. I just have a note here. I think the low flying started at low flying solo started at 25 hours, and aerobatics at 50. And just to give you an idea, 25 hours. I don't think there'd be many people doing low flying solo in the civil situation today. But the whole population had come out of the war, and they were still very used to low flying aircraft. So all we had to do was to not low fly over the top of pregnant cows. But I had an interesting experience low flying solo. I had a particular field that I would go into, surrounded by trees about 100 foot high. And to get in, you had to come over close to the top of the trees and then come down as fast as the chipmunk would go. And of course, full flap on to get as much drag as you could, and down you would go. Anyway, I'm sitting there, and she's going, the old gypsy major is going tick, 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 tick as we go down. And I got down to on my regulation 30 feet above the ground, of course, and I said, well, it's time to go around. So I put on the power, and I reached down to drop the flaps. And I found that I'd been going tick, 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 tick down like that, so damn close to the stall because I hadn't put the flaps on. And it certainly taught me a lesson from the point of view of you've got to be careful. So this was my chipmunk period, and we had, of course, to do formation flying, etc. We had plenty of time to do that in 120 hours. And got reasonably proficient. So then it was time for the Harvard, and the Harvard I had my second engine failure in a harbour. We were on one of these summer camps, and I was doing a takeoff solo, and I just raised the undercarriage and the engine cut dead. Fortunately, it was a 6,000 foot runway, so I was able to put the aeroplane down and stop before the end of the runway. And most of my forced landings have all been carefully orchestrated to land back on an airfield. I've only ever landed in a ploughed paddock once. So that was quite an interesting one, and we then went off and did the wings course. And the wings course, I might say, before I just pass on to that I never found out what went wrong with the harbour. I did find out what went wrong with the chipmunk, but there was a culture in the Air Force at that time that pilots were not really welcome in the hangar. You fly them and we fix them. But mind your own business, particularly if you were just a cadet. So anyway, that's why I never found out what happened with the we went on then to do the wings course, and we then had to do rather more footwork, classroom stuff, which of course, being an engineer, I didn't have much difficulty with. It was not terribly in terrible depth. It wasn't too bad at all. It would be nothing like it would be today, I'm sure. And of the 17 of us that were on this course, only one guy failed, and he failed the course because he couldn't pass the ground exams. He became a great friend of ours, and he also became a brilliant lawyer, and also became
Speaker of the House of Lords.
The House of Lords. It was the Speaker of the House of Lords. He was quite bright, but he just couldn't handle the technicalities. Got it. It's fun. So that's where we got to. How am I doing? One of the things that is interesting is that all our flying, practically right through, was all VFR, with no aids. We had four VHF channels in the chipmunks, which was supposed to be really red hot. And the only, for an instrument rating, the instrument rating really involved capacity to actually fly the aeroplane on instruments. And there was only one aid that was available in the UK from UK sources, and that was the AN beacon, fixed beacon, which gave you a line across the beacon. So you had two possibilities of going that way or going that way towards the beacon. You got a null at the beacon. If you were left going in, say, you had an A in Morse that you would hear, and if you went to the right, you would have an N in Morse. When you combine those two, it's a continuous tone. So that when you're on the line, dead on the line, you've got continuous tone. So that was the magnificent thing. The only other thing that was available was the Americans had ground control approach, which was it's called GCA, and it was set up to suit particularly B-47s. And I did a GCA in training in Chipmunk, and I'm going along, and the idea is that you're being talked down by the controller, and he keeps telling you, "You're doing fine, man. You're doing fine. That's real good." You know. My instructor says, get up out of the hood and take a look over the side, and I'm just brushing the treetops. Because the glide slope that they set up, you know, was just so flat. And but anyway, that was an interesting experience. It was quite eye-opening to me. It was the start of my experience of Americans in flying, which is not a particularly good one particularly from that era, I have to say. One day I was just out of interest. I was going downwind in a chipmunk to land at our Kidlington airstrip, and all of a sudden there's a B-47 a few yards off to my left, and he's going just a little faster than I am, not much, and we waved to each other. But the airfields were so damn close to each other, and of course it was worse during the war. A whole heap of them by 1952 had been dropped, but they were so close that he was doing a bit wider than normal circuit for his airfield. But it's quite terrifying when you take a look at the wartime. All our maps will all actually still have all the wartime airfields on them, and just to see how close they all were, amazing. I don't know how it was handled the finding their own field actually. Quite difficult. But, now I think maybe I might leave the moving on to the Vampire until a further time, and may also cover then some of my subsequent flying, because I reckon I must be awfully close to having a bell.
Thank you very much, Clin, for a fabulous part one. We'll look forward to part 2 and 3, however many it takes, really, because we haven't discussed the Avro Cadet at all. And if you want, I'll talk about the Avro Cadet if you like. It took me a year to get in it, but after certain people stole my place. But no, thanks very much for the talk, and we'll have I'm sure, feel free to ask Clin questions while we eat pizza. But another round of applause.